welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our two special guest authors are Amy Wellborn and Anne Engelhardt. The book is Adventures in Assisi on the Path with St. Francis, and it's published by Franciscan Media. And welcome to EWTN's Bookmark. It's great to have you back again, Amy, and also you as well, Anne. You've been here before. We've talked about several of your books, going back to Friendship with Jesus about Pope Benedict several years ago. And then Bambinelli Sunday was another one we did here, which A Christmas Blessing, which is still a very, very popular book. Is that one of your best sellers so far?
I think so. I mean, it only was published in 2013, and it is a Christmas book, and Christmas books sell well. Right. And so, yeah, so we're really pleased with the reception of it. Yeah.
Right, and here we are right before Christmas, so if people are still thinking about something for Christmas, this might be wonderful. There's a lot of grandmas out there thinking about what they might want to get their grandkids. Now, the new work here, Anne, is Adventures in Assisi on the Path with St. Francis. Now, you're the illustrator, but between the two of you, who came up with actually the idea? Was this something from Franciscan Media or something the two of you talked about?
Actually, this was Amy's idea. And so maybe you want to...
Yeah, this book was my idea. Bambinelli Sunday was Anne's concept. And then this was mine. I have a great devotion to St. Francis of Assisi, and I have 5 children, and I've read every children's book about St. Francis to my children. And there's some wonderful ones out there. But I've just felt the need to do something, or the desire to do something a little different. I was inspired by a recent biography of St. Francis that has come out by a Dominican, ironically enough, Father Augustine Thompson. And it really, you know, it's not a revisionary look. It's a sort of an attempt to get back to the sources and look and explore who St. Francis really was from his own words. And I wanted to bring that to children because I was very affected by that, and thought that what he had to say about Francis and what poverty is, where joy and humility are found, is something that children need to hear. And I wanted to present that in a really kind of attractive story way, and I wanted to take kids to Assisi. So that's.
So you took your kids there?
I took my kids to Assisi. Right. Yeah. A couple of years ago, we had we're fortunate enough to spend some time in Europe, and I knew I couldn't do the book without having gone to Assisi myself. I mean, there's no way. I mean, you can see pictures, you can read about it, but unless you actually go and climb those hills, you really don't know what it's like. So I'm really glad that I was able to go and do that research.
Well, it's one of the few places outside of Rome I've actually had a chance to get to. And Anne, looking at the wonderful illustrations you have here, you really captured the texture of the land and the difference between, and I know the way you laid out the book out, two of you kind of, it's almost like following around, I don't want to say a puzzle or a maze, but you're going from place to place to place, using it as, in a sense, a tour, and at the same time as a teaching tool. Now, you went there as well, right?
Yes, yeah. I actually went 2 times, once with my children, and the once just my husband and I went. And it's such a beautiful, extraordinary place. And the setting of these Umbrian hills and the olive groves, and then, of course, the beautiful architecture. And just the sense of peace that exists there, it was something I really wanted to capture. So I felt it necessary to go, but also to really represent it as it is. So I tried to be as faithful as possible to those actual places.
Now, when you go there, and because you do watercolors,
yes.
That's what these really are, and I know we're seeing some of the images, the beautiful images from the book, while we're speaking. But I mean, when you were there, did you do sketches?
I did some
things. Do you do things like that, or how do you do that?
I did some sketches because I wanted to kind of imagine some of the compositions. But I also took hundreds and hundreds of photographs, as did Amy, and I was able to use those as references.
So then you go back to your studio and able to work off of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, Amy, as far as the storyline itself, you've got 2 children here, basically with their uncle, who's a brother. Is that basically
a friar?
A friar. Okay. And they kind of take a little tour of this. How did you decide to come up with that? Was that based on a predetermined when you went there to look at Assisi? Was that out of your own experience of walking around Assisi with your children? Where did that come from?
No, it came really from my sense and my understanding as faith as a journey. And I wanted children to take a journey with these children. because they're journeying through Assisi, but they're journeying in the footsteps of St. Francis, so that means they're journeying with Francis, which means they're journeying with Christ. And so they start in a place of where they are unhappy and dissatisfied, sort of like Francis was. And through visiting the places associated with his life and sort of experiencing, in a way, the same things he experienced, in the end they reach the same kind of understanding that Francis did of where joy lies and is to be found.
Right, it struck me in looking right at the beginning, because the two children, Lorenzo, right, and Gianna, right? And Gianna was tired of this family vacation, and I think of the term that people use today, like first world problems, you know what I mean? The big problem is, you know, we're kind of tired of our vacation, and here you are setting that in a world where he takes them, Uncle takes them on a place to see what life is really all about.
Right.
And that the difficulties that are there as well, right?
Yes. I mean, and, you know, children have all different kinds of problems. And, you know, first world children, second world children, third world children. But in the end, all of our problems are sort of the same in that they are rooted in the fact that we are, you know, pilgrims on this earth, and this is not heaven. And we have to sort of come to a place where we understand that. And we're not looking for permanent satisfaction in an impermanent world. And we're also seeking to imitate Christ. And to me, when I just want to go back to Father Thompson's biography for a minute, you know, one of the things he really talks about and explores in that book is, what did Francis mean by poverty? You know, we naturally associate St. Francis with poverty. Did he only mean material poverty? And we tend to think that's what he did.
That seems to be what gets emphasized.
Yeah, that he was sort of telling us all to, you know, literally, you know, follow in Jesus' footsteps, which is, of course, why not?
Right, of course.
But is that what Francis in his own writings talks about? And actually, no. You know, in his writings, Francis talks about poverty a lot, but the poverty he talks about is the poverty of Christ on the cross, calling, you know, from Philippians 2, in that what Christ did is empty himself and take the form of a slave. And so if we're going to follow Christ, sometimes that may mean absolute material poverty and embracing that, the evangelical counsels. But it all, whether we do that or not, our poverty begins with giving up our pride, our desire for wealth, our desire for being, you know, for winning, for being right. It involves giving up anything that puts us above and against other human beings who are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And that's the poverty you know, that Francis embraced for himself. That penitential kind of poverty, which often gets lost when we talk about St. Francis today. And that is the poverty that leads to joy. And so that's kind of the journey I wanted to take these kids on, and it sounds really serious, but I wanted to do it in a way that would speak to children, that was kind of fun in a way, that was engaging, so that but at the same time that they're challenged, that they're challenged to look at their own behavior, and at the end maybe hopefully see that, yeah, I was a little selfish, and it made me actually unhappier to be selfish, and to follow in Francis's footsteps of embracing the cross, which then paradoxically leads to joy.
Right, right. Now I was thinking in terms of, while you were talking about that, Amy, and with the idea that, you know, St. Francis is really universal. I mean, he's probably, of all the saints out there, there's, you know, everybody can put a claim on him in some different ways, how they want to view him, whether it's ecology-minded things or poverty or just that he's such a nice guy kind of a thing. And one of the things that struck me in the choices you made in the paintings actually of the young children, that there's sort of a universal quality to them. You know, it's not like you look at them and say, those are little American children or those are little Italian children. They have a broader sense to them. Was that intentional on your part?
It really was. Amy and I both wanted to show the universality of the church, to show that, you know, the Catholic Church isn't just white American children. And so I have a lot of diversity in my own family. And so the little boy is modeled after my nephew, who's actually Irish and Cuban and Chinese. And the girl is, her name is Gianna in real life, and her mom is African American and her father is Italian. And they're sort of supposed to be Italian kids because their names are Gianna and Lorenzo. But we just wanted to show that they could be cousins, they could be related, and yet have different ethnic backgrounds.
The other thing I noticed in here was that you talk about the images of St. Francis are referenced, and I know, and is it the one right near the beginning, one of the images is, I believe based, if I read it right, one of the earliest images that were available of what Francis looked like when he was younger, right?
Yes, and in fact, I learned that from Father Augustine Thompson as well. And yeah, in fact, they believe, I think, that it may have been painted while he was still alive. So it is the earliest known one. And so he looks slightly different than you might see in other instances. The rest of these little vignettes that I show, I actually have, we have two things going on. We have telling the story of St. Francis's life, and then the action of the children on their little journey. And in order
so on some cases, one side, like in one part, you've got the kids out by the baptismal kind of having fun, and you're talking specifically about baptism, what it means. You've also got this little tableau on the side that's more historical looking, right?
And that shows Francis being baptized.
Him being baptized. Right.
And in order to distinguish between the two time periods, what I decided to do was to use the famous frescoes of Giotto from the Basilica. And I framed each of those little vignettes with a border very similar to one that you would see in the Basilica, which is a scene later in the book. And it was just a way to kind of, you know, separate the two events, and also to give it the flavor of Italy and of that period.
Now I noticed, Amy, as well, there's the storyline running, and then along the bottom, there's these other captions. He was rich beyond measure, yet he and his holy mother chose poverty. All praise be yours, my Lord, through brothers, wind and air, and fair and stormy, all the weather's moods. I'm assuming those are the words of Francis then,
yes,
right?
Yeah, and it's cited at the beginning of the copyright page. Yeah, those are quotes from Francis, from his own writing. So again, I wanted to anchor it in the real words of Francis, not legends, not, you know, contemporary ideologies or anything like that, but in the real words of Francis that somehow reflect what's going on each page.
Nothing then must keep us back, nothing separate us from him, nothing come between us and him. And you also have, again, for children, in a sense, the storyline. It's always interesting to know that Francis wasn't always so quote-unquote peaceful, that he was, and you have the image of him when he was really a soldier.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of people don't know that up above Assisi there's a castle. And you know, when I took my kids there, that of course was a place you had to go, and of course we wanted to go.
That was the most interesting place, I'm sure, right?
Sure. And I mean, and it's a great setting because you can actually, you know, you can physically look down and see the whole landscape of Assisi, and it gives you, you know, for me, what it evoked is a sense of the world for Francis. This is Francis's world, which is our world too. We're looking at the same world that Francis looked at. We're on the same journey. We have the same challenges. As on that page, the theme is battles. We're fighting battles too. You know, we're obsessed with winning and losing. And, you know, as Francis discovered, is that really the point? And so we're challenged to question that too.
Well, as a mom, and in dealing with that, and we talked about, you know, kind of what we're called to. We all have different states in life, the church would say, of what our calling actually is. But do you see that with your children in the sense, though, and both of you, in the sense that the idea of winning, the society, it's all about achievement, what have you done, where do you stack up? Is that a sense you both as moms?
Oh no, we're all, you know, we
never.
You've surpassed that, you've moved beyond that. Okay.
No, of course it is, and it's a real challenge.
We're doing our new reality show with your families.
You know, raising children, trying to raise Christian children in the contemporary world is a real challenge for innumerable reasons, and one of them is that kind of insidious emphasis on success that creeps into even, you know, catechesis and formation. You know, when we say to children, you need to use your gifts so you're the best you can be, and all of that kind of thing. Well, on one level, there's kind of nothing wrong with that, but then I step back and I read the gospel, and I look at St. Francis, and I look at Christ, and I think, is that really the gospel? Or is the gospel something even more fundamental, which is to love wherever you are, wherever you find yourself, to be Christ. And to maybe set aside your ambition, maybe to be able to, you know, not focus on your gifts in a secular, even personality kind of way, but to focus on the gift that Christ gives you that you're called to share with others. Whether that means, no matter what grades you make, whether you end up working in an office or, in a nursing home, there are saints everywhere, and that's what we're called to be.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I always think when I think of things like that, the late Father Groeschel, a great friend of the networks, he used to always say the holiest people he knew were the little old Italian ladies in the
Yes.
back pew. You think about, or the when he worked in New York City, the little Baptist black grandmothers and stuff who were holding the families together and doing those things. I think that is true, that we have to bloom where we're planted, but realize that it's not the way the world evaluates us, it's really what Christ evaluates, and hence he knows what's really going on inside. One of the things that struck me too was the way it's the friar. There's one image of him like sitting on the bus with the children, and he has this kind of serene, overseeing look, almost like, in a sense, Francis or the church sort of being the gentle guide. Was that intentional as well?
Yes. Throughout the book, the children start off, as we said, kind of bickering with each other, and eventually, I think they learn the lesson of Saint Francis. And in that particular scene, they're getting along, and they're kind of forgiving each other. And in the background, you'll see in the shrubs the famous arrangement of the letters PAX.
Oh, I see it right out the back of the bus.
So
right,
it's like
right.
a little hint that this is, they finally achieved that, and the friar looks content, like, okay, mission accomplished.
Now, when you've got the image outside of for your own children, or maybe let's ask you for you, what was the most powerful thing for each of you when you went to Assisi? What was the thing that you had talked about peace, Amy, but was there some place where you felt the most peaceful? Was it,
Well, I think for me, maybe the tomb of St. Francis, which is under the crypt of the Basilica, and which is filled with people all the time praying. And we have an image of that in the book, of people still coming to Francis. That's what the thing is. They're still coming to Francis. And that really struck me because, going back just a touch, to the whole theme of success. When he died, Francis, on paper, was a failure. Even as he was dying, his order was being kind of divided, and people were questioning his original vision and all of that kind of thing. He was a, quote, failure. And we can see how meaningless those concepts are. And to go to the tomb of Francis and experience that peace and experience the draw that the gospel still has for people from all over the world was very powerful to me.
I think the Portiuncula, which is the little chapel inside of the basilica, was, just from a visual and artistic perspective, was so striking. But also to see the simplicity of this little ancient chapel was really powerful. And it was on Good Friday, the first time that we were there.
Oh, wow, okay.
So to see hundreds of people lining up for confession, and they had every language you could imagine, little stalls set up. And also the San Damiano Chapel is also really very powerful. And when we were there on Good Friday, the friars were chanting, and it was just, it was extraordinary to see that was the place where he had that encounter with Christ.
Right, which is always the little portion. It's always interesting because I guess it's like people go to the Holy Land when you realize these aren't just stories.
Right.
These are real people who lived their lives and struggled through their lives like we're called to as well. It's not that they were walking 3 inches above the ground, or that they didn't really exist, that they did. The image of looking at this, and I remember being there, but looking at the painting that you did with the little church inside the bigger church, and that whole idea of the image, in many times, a domestic family, or what we're called to be, in a sense of having that little church in home as part of the larger universal church. Just that image of the children looking at that, I thought was a powerful image.
That's an interesting insight. I know that was a challenging image for you to paint.
It was, because
the perspective.
I did need to show the contrast in the scale, and I had tried several versions of it, and where to place the children. Should they be up close looking in? Should they have just arrived into the space overlooking it? you know, those are the kinds of decisions you have to make when you're trying to tell a story.
And maybe even for kids too, smaller is more accessible for them. Sometimes if it's too big, it seems too far away. And in a sense, the smallness of the church among the largeness of the church at the same time. One of the things that struck me too in looking at the this particular book was that you had this nice, like I said, it almost looked like you could sit there and have it like a kid's maze, you know, of the layout of Assisi. And Bambinelli Sunday, I noticed when you had done that one, you hadn't done one like that. But I think you had mentioned that maybe in the new edition,
Yes,
there's actually going to be something similar to that,
Well,
right?
there'll be images in the inside cover.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what they are, but do you remember what it is?
it's the, I believe it's the Via San Gregorio or Menor, which is the famous street in Naples, where all of the little nativity sets are made.
Right. Well, let me ask you just before we go. We're coming up on Christmas. You know, Francis transcends all holidays, but obviously Bambinelli Sunday is specific to Christmas. And though people might have heard of the book or whatever, I have to admit, I didn't know what Bambinelli Sunday was until I read your book and looked at. Why don't you just tell us, Amy, what it actually is about?
Well, it's a real thing, and it's the third Sunday of Advent. And in Rome, it's traditional for children to bring their bambinelli, that is the little infant Jesus from their presepe or creche sets, to St. Peter's Square for the Holy Father to bless them. And it's a wonderful, neat tradition, and if you go online, you can find videos of children celebrating this and of the prayers. And so Anne had heard about this, and she also had kind of a lifelong fascination with nativity sets.
Yeah. Yeah, I always love them, and I know you're from New York as well, and at the Metropolitan Museum they always have the beautiful tree at Christmas time with the Neapolitan angels and creches, and I've always been fascinated with them. And when I found that most of them come from Naples and come from this very particular street where there are just shops and shops and shops with miniature villages and things, and I thought it would be really fun to integrate these two elements, you know, the artisans of Naples with this wonderful event, this celebration in St. Peter's Square.
And last year, when the book was published, you know, through my blog and so on online, I tried to encourage people in their parishes to celebrate this. And we found that some parishes, particularly in New York with an Italian background, already do celebrate Bambinelli Sunday. And so we're hoping to make this kind of a thing, because the point is that what you're, again, it kind of ties to the domestic church, is that you bring your Christ child to the church, to the parish, to be blessed by the priest or the deacon, and then you take him back into your home. And so you're bringing Christ back into your home. It's tied to Christ's universal church.
The connection going to and then taking back. And,
Yeah. And it makes for, I think it's a wonderful little ceremony.
One of the schools that, I'm sorry, one of the schools that I presented these books in some elementary schools, and one of them, we did a little craft, and the children actually made a little baby Jesus, just like the boy in the book, and the pastor came to bless them. And he was so excited because he said, I'm just so happy that they are bringing Jesus into their home, and it's putting the proper focus on Christmas, because obviously, you know, kids, you know, they're bombarded with so many other images.
They might be bringing Santa Claus in to have him
exactly,
or something.
exactly. So I think it's a nice, really helpful way to kind of focus the season.
Let me ask you, you worked on 4 different books together, I believe, right? Now you just worked on this one. Is there another one in the works? Is there one you're planning on right now?
We have 2 or 3 ideas, that nothing concrete right now. I mean, we have ideas. I mean, we always have ideas. So yeah, hopefully.
Well, let me ask you, when you work together, since obviously you've worked both ways, one where you had the idea and then you put it together, and then you had an idea and put it together. How long, when you're working together, does it actually take from the time you finally say, there's an idea, yeah, the publisher's willing to go with this? How long does it take to actually get it put together?
You know, sometimes some of the ideas were born many, many years ago. It's just they had to wait their turn, you know. But the process takes about a year.
Yes,
you say,
about a year.
Because you have the idea, you sort of pitch the idea, and then there's lots of preparatory drawings, and then plot outlines, and visual sketches as well as literal sketches, and then the paintings take a long time to produce. So
Okay, very good. Well, we're out of time. We'll look forward to whatever comes up next, and certainly Adventures in Assisi, On the Path with St. Francis. And of course, for Christmas, there's Bambinelli Sunday, A Christmas Blessing. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Doug.
Done wonderful work. Keep it up. Always good to see you again.
Thank you so much.
See the fellow Long Islander, Amy Wellborn, and Engelhardt, Adventures in Assisi, On the Path with St. Francis is published by Franciscan Media, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. That's EWTNRC.com. And don't forget about Bambinelli Sunday as well. See you next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark.